Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here for the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today is January 2nd, 2022. Today's show, we're going to talk about Oklahoma State's win over Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl yesterday. We're going to do two videos here. It's going to be one podcast together. So first video is going to be about Oklahoma State and their win over Notre Dame. The second one is going to be about Baylor's win over Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl and also their win over Iowa State in basketball. So something I'm going to try to start doing now is maybe breaking up the videos more to make them more school specific. If that sounds good to you guys, please let me know. But I'm going to try to do that. Have had a couple episodes that have had a bunch of stuff for different schools in it, and I've had to list out the timestamps and whatnot. Maybe just a bit easier on you all video wise if I put specific video, team videos in playlists. So they'll be on playlists on the YouTube page and then on podcasts. I'm just going to put them all together, and I'll let you guys know if you're trying to hear about a certain team where you fast forward to in the show so you can hear about that. So I'll timestamp those things as well. Before we get into things, let you guys know today's show is brought to you by Sonos. It is an immersive sound experience. Whether you're listening to music or watching a football game, Sonos just makes it a little bit better. So download the Sonos app and go purchase a Sonos speaker. Different options available too. Go check out the website. Just Google Sonos and you guys can find their whole collection. All right, let's break down Notre Dame and Oklahoma State. Big win for the Pokes to start off 2022.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, everybody, I am Josh Neighbors here of the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Make sure you guys subscribe and download on YouTube. We're really going to try to up that base in 2022. But we are here to talk about Oklahoma State's resounding 37-35 victory over Notre Dame in what was a really basically two football games. It felt like there was the Notre Dame part of the game and there was the Oklahoma State part of the game. And Oklahoma State comes out victorious. Just from a general standpoint, they go 12-2 on the season. And Mike Gundy said this is, biggest win in program history, I believe, were his words, to go out and beat. I know they weren't a completely full strength Notre Dame, but a motivated Notre Dame playing for their new coach and their new head coach, Marcus Freeman. They came out on fire, and Oklahoma State got punched in the mouth multiple times, and then they kind of stemmed the tide. And they've done that a bunch this season. I mean, this is a team, Texas talk about how, hey, they're 5-7, but things could have been a lot different. Oklahoma State's the opposite way. They get punched in the mouth against Boise. They get punched in the mouth against Texas. They almost go down 3 scores in that game before the pick 6. OU, they're down 10 plus in the second half. Baylor, they were down big. They should have won that game. They got stopped a bunch inside the 5. And then also against Notre Dame. This has been a resilient bunch, which feels weird considering their offense isn't this normally like prolific offense, although it was pretty prolific yesterday. But for them to finish this, this way, to beat a team like Notre Dame, once again, and not full strength, it is significant. And it's also significant in the same way Baylor beat Ole Miss, because in a couple years, when we lose Oklahoma and Texas in the conference, and we add, Cincinnati and BYU and UCF and Houston, these kinds of wins are important. I know not everybody values the bowl games, but the Big 12 is going to have to prove itself and try to make people believe that they are a Power 5 conference. In terms of recruiting, without Oklahoma and Texas, they do not pass the eye test, I guess you could say, according to recruiting experts. They're not in the same level as the other Power 5 conferences. In terms of results, and trying to talk about the advanced analytics and kind of what we're seeing right now in the field, they are on the same level of some of these, a lot of these Power 5 conferences, I guess you could say. Will there be a Ohio State or a, what we've known as Clemson or a Alabama or a Georgia in the new Big 12? That remains to be seen. But results like this are very important moving forward. Early season and non-conference games, bowl games where you're playing opponents that care, that show up, that are trying to win, that are high caliber ones. Even Texas Tech's win against Mississippi State's, pretty impressive or important as well, because of kind of the factors going into that, right? This was a 6-6 team that had lost its coach and was losing its interim coach, going up against a coach that Mike Leach, that wanted to beat them pretty badly, and they come away with a pretty convincing win. Results like that are important. Now, people can shake it off and say, well, those are the lower tier SEC teams and the games they don't care about. that middle class needs to be strong too. I know there's so much focus on the top of the conferences. And that's why these wins are big, but like wins like Texas Tech's are important, but even more even more so, even to further this point, beating teams like Notre Dame on a neutral field where they really seemed to care and kind of gave them one of the best offensive performances of the season. I know there's no Kyron Williams, but to go out there like that and to get hit in the mouth and then come back and dominate that football game. That was all Oklahoma State in that second half. That one touchdown was there kind of, it was almost like they let it happen. But they were already up 2 scores at that point. A little bit of concern there with the Spencer Sanders turnover. We'll talk about Spencer Sanders here in a little bit, but this is an important win for Oklahoma State moving forward because they want to posture themselves and position themselves at the top of what will be the new Big 12. Obviously, they want to be there at the top of the Big 12 currently, but the opportunity for Oklahoma State to be one of the best teams in the conference coming up is right there. They've been the little brother to Oklahoma in recent years. That's been just a fact. This year they weren't, and this was supposed to be the Oklahoma team to end all Oklahoma teams, right? This was supposed to be, or at least in modern history, this was supposed to be the year, and the things didn't coalesce. And I know there's some weird officiating in that game, but Oklahoma State gets that win and comes real close to winning that Big 12 championship game. This is also what's impressive about it is that there was so much disappointment. And how often do we see teams come close to the precipice of accomplishing something important? And I know they wouldn't have been in the playoff anyway. They still would have been in the Year 6 game. But for them to go out there after such a deflating loss and losing the conference championship and, getting punched in the mouth like they did, to rally and come back and win the game just shows you kind of the character of Mike Gundy's program and this team and kind of the limits they can reach. I mean, they've been coming back against blue bloods all year. I know Texas wasn't Texas, but coming back against Oklahoma, a team that's had your number for that long, and then coming back against Baylor and just coming so close, against such a good defensive coach and Dave Aranda, like we saw last night. Boy, did they have it working. We'll do another video about that. But for once again, the effort, the kind of the clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose speech. It felt like that Mike Gundy must have given them at the end and during halftime, and even that drive before the end of the first half was a very important drive to set them up in position to compete in that second half. And for for Oklahoma State's offense to come on like an avalanche, just scoring in bunches in the second half in a way we hadn't seen, felt like they were adapting and it felt like, okay, I know bowl games, defenses, we seem to think that they're not always operating at peak efficiency. Some of them just kind of want to get to the off season, but for them to put the clamps down on defense, then just to absolutely roast Notre Dame's defense that had done a good job in that first half was it was impressive. And also the big thing was they weren't in third down a whole lot. And that was huge for them because they were 3 for 14 on the day on third down, but they didn't get themselves in that spot a ton. 605 yards of total offense. And once again, I know the defensive performance won't look excellent, but the second half, they only give up 7 points after giving up 28 the entire first half. And it felt, you could feel it coming there in that second half. I was actually watching the game with some friends and they were saying, "Oh, Oklahoma State, you told us about that defense, Josh. They weren't very good." And I said, actually, honestly, this is a team that's had some struggles in recent games in the first half. We got toasted first half against OU, toasted first half against Baylor. This is actually a spot, and a little bit against Boise. That's much earlier in the season, but actually not unfamiliar territory for Oklahoma State. And they showed why they have one of the best defenses out there, in the entire country. And their offense just completely came alive. And I want to talk about Spencer Sanders after we take this quick break. But just generally speaking, this kind of win is important. People can devalue it as much as they want. But if you keep stacking enough of these wins, the respect will come. And next key is winning those non-conference clashes against other Power 5 teams. For example, the game between Kansas State and Stanford, like that's a game, saying, look, Stanford's not as good as they have been, but Kansas State beating them up, showing how strong the middle class is. I mentioned that Texas Tech game too. Another example, West Virginia beating Virginia Tech when they came there as top 15 team. These are the kinds of wins that build your profile as a conference as a whole, right? And it's important for Iowa State to get over that hump against Iowa because those are the kinds of games that we're looking at. Your Cincinnati's against Notre Dame's, BYU's accomplishments this season against the Pac-12. I think the results can continue and the Big 12 can get that respect nationally. What happens to the playoff, whatever. But I think we just can't assume at this point it's going to be expanded in the immediate future. So to get a seat at the table, to be considered, these teams have to keep performing. And just a reminder, The Big 12 is going to add 3 teams that won at least 10 games this year, right? Cincinnati was 13-1, and look, out of the two semifinal games, they were a lot more competitive than they were much more competitive than Georgia was. Than Michigan was against Georgia, as my thing is going off. Spencer Sanders highlight there. Much more competitive in that setting, in that game. BYU, another 10-win team, tough loss in the bowl game. Houston, 12-win football team this season as well. And obviously UCF, we know them pretty good. Hey, they beat Florida in a bowl game. So I know it didn't matter that much, but these kinds of things matter because it feels like this conference is going to have to try and earn respect. And I don't think they should have to, but that's just the reality of the situation. Will be compared to other conferences, in unfair ways. But just because they're losing Oklahoma and Texas, this year is an example, even with them in the conference, these two teams were succeeding Baylor and Oklahoma State, and also succeeding in their bowl matchups too. They didn't get boat raced, didn't get dragged. And it felt like these games did matter some. No, are they semifinals or early big preseason games? No, but Notre Dame was pretty motivated. It seemed they were pretty motivated. Their players were fired up pretty early. Ole Miss was motivated. Their fans were motivated. All these teams are motivated to come and play these games. So these kinds of wins are important, and it also does help on the recruiting trail as well. I know you're not necessarily competing with Notre Dame's of the world, but it does help you say, hey, look, this is where this program is right now. We're building, and we have a chance. You have a chance to be the class of a conference moving forward. I think that could be a good selling pitch. All right, quick word from our sponsors here. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to built.com today. That's built.com to check out the entire collection of Built Bars right now. So many flavors. It's also a great way to start off. You got New Year's resolutions, trying to eat healthier. Well, this is a great substitute for a candy bar, something like that. And also, it's a protein bar. It's better for you. It's got a lot of protein, not many calories, not a lot of sugar. And they've got a bunch of delicious flavors as well. So you don't have to feel too guilty about eating these. Once again, built.com. It's built.com. Promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off today. All right, so the second thing I want to talk about with this game is Spencer Sanders. Didn't mention him much at the beginning. Need to mention him now. So if you are familiar with this podcast, you've probably heard me talk a lot about Spencer Sanders. I am the president of the Spencer Sanders Hive. I'm a huge, I really think he's got the ability. I think he's got the talent. I was believing Mike Gundy earlier this year when he said, Spencer's become a much better player. He's gotten full practice. Well, that didn't necessarily bear itself out for a majority of the season. He kind of had these peaks and valleys where things were rough in the beginning, dealing with the injury too, then comes back and becomes this really good game manager who did a good job finishing off games, right? He was doing a good job managing against Baylor, and that kind of thing got hairy late. But, he did a good job, I thought, against Iowa State, all things considered, even though they ended up losing that game this year. Did a really good job in that game against Boise, as I had mentioned. Awesome against Kansas State when he was, kind of in control there. Texas, he punctuated that win late, led the charge against West Virginia. They were really good against TCU. I know their defense wasn't good. Managed things perfectly in that game at Tech, which had been one, they shut him out in that game, but just kind of managed that offense perfectly. And then made the requisite plays when he had to against Oklahoma. And also didn't put the defense in a bad spot in that OU game late. He allowed them to have a lot of field to work with and also win the game. He didn't necessarily go out there and punctuate it the way that he had maybe in that Texas game, but he was there and once again, not his best game, but has in that game over 300 yards of offense, runs for basically 100 on the ground. If you take out the, sack situations, and also, managed things well enough in that game. It felt like he was settling in that game manager role. Then that Big 12 championship game happened, which was an abject disaster. And questions have been asked, like, is it time to move on from Spencer Sanders? Mike Gundy seems to have a really strong connection with him, and I really like Spencer Sanders. I think he's got the ability. This is what makes this kind of performance so frustrating. And for those of you who did not see the numbers yesterday, this is the best game he's played in his entire collegiate career. He goes for 371 yards in the air, 4 touchdown passes, no interceptions, 17 carries for 125 on the ground. Did have a fumble later on in the game in a tough spot. And I was thinking, oh no, Spencer, this is where people kind of rag on you. This is where you get that reputation. But it didn't ended up not mattering. And look, they were in such a big hole. They needed that scoring punch, and he delivered it. And Tay Martin was so so strong in this game. I mean, 10 for 104, 3 touchdowns. Presley had an awesome game too, finding all kinds of weapons all over the place. But that connection that he's had with Tay Martin is special. And that's the kind of guy where, look, when he throws a Tay Martin, it has a different feel. It feels like he's making those difficult throws that we know that he can make. He doesn't seem to have that connection with a lot of the other guys. And there are a lot of young wide receivers on this Oklahoma State team. So maybe that's something that changes as things go on. We know that right now, we're probably not going to see, I don't think we're going to see Tay Martin. I don't think he's got any eligibility left. It appears that he played in enough games, he's played 5 seasons. And then the season he played last year was, the COVID year. That's why he ends up getting the 5th. So I don't think he's gonna be able to come back, but they've got to find some way for him to continue to build connections and find more wide receivers. And look, actually has not been a problem for them in the past. Think about the number of really good wide receivers that Oklahoma State has had. So hopefully they can kind of keep developing those guys and Spencer can get that feel. But Steven Simcox, who does Locked On Horned Frogs, had brought up the idea that, look, is it time for them to move on? Is it time for these two, the Spencer and Oklahoma State to part ways? I kind of scoffed at it, but maybe there is some merit to it. Maybe people think that, look, he just can't be that guy consistently. That's actually not who he is. We can't get sucked into one game and think that Spencer can do this. But I just feel like if he does that like 70% of the time, or if he is 70% of what he was in that game on a consistent basis, he's a damn good player. And he's got 2 more years of eligibility left. This is a guy that's, 60 touchdowns in his 3 seasons. And the interception numbers aren't great, but this feels like a guy that could turn the corner as he gets older. This could be a type of player that you see, in his 3rd and 4th year of college, fix a lot of the ailments that he had earlier on. That's the question, because if he does that, we're looking at a guy that, I think he can play in the NFL. Like, I really do believe that, but it's a question of, can he fix those things? There's a reason why, as a guy who can sling it all over the place, Steven Simcox is asking, should he even be back next year? Should he be a part of Oklahoma State's future plans? And I mean, once again, I don't think it's warranted. I really do believe he can get this thing under control. But despite him not performing great, they were still really good. You could say a lot of that was because of the defense. They're going to get a lot of that defense back. And if he can elevate his game a little bit, and that defense takes a little bit of regression, they can still be an awesome outfit next season. It's just a question of, can Spencer Sanders put that together? We've been asking that for a while. Second off season as the commander-in-chief of this offense, let's see what happens. But Mike Gundy seems to have a lot of belief in him. And, I really do want to. I kind of go back and forth on it. But I think for him, this game was huge. And he's going to feel great going into the offseason. Look, maybe we look back and say this was the game that Spencer Sanders changed things. I think that's possible. It's gonna matter. Next season we're gonna be asking a lot of these questions, so it is exciting. But I thought he was all over the place yesterday. I thought he was single-handedly carrying the offense in a way that we have not seen in the past, and it was exciting. And he's an exciting player when he's on like that. So, Spencer Sanders, props to him. Over 500 yards of total offense in that game. Let's see. Yeah, under 500. He was at, I'm doing quick math in my head. 371 plus 125 is going to put you at 496. So just 4 yards off. So basically he had 500 yards of total offense with him. But once again, his best performance as an Oklahoma State Cowboy, and his future is one of the very interesting things Oklahoma State will deal with. The future of a lot of players Oklahoma State's going to have to deal with. Also, shout out Malcolm Rodriguez, man. Big interception in the end. I mean, these guys, no opting out here. I mean, Malcolm Rodriguez, Devin Harper, Colby Harvell-Peel, like the normal guys that we hear were in this game. They were active. They were the ones making plays. So it was good to see those guys not opt out and them have a really strong finish. All right, that will do it for this edition of the show. Once again, make sure you subscribe. Make sure that you guys on YouTube and give us thumbs up. And we love the feedback too. I always love the feedback from you all. It gives me ideas for future shows. Tell your friends about this too. Trying to grow this channel here in 2022. All right, that will do it for us. Find us on Twitter at LO Big 12. You can find me at Josh Neighbors _. Till next time, my friends, as always, stay safe.